So previously we covered SQL injections, and in today's class we're going to talk about blind SQL injections. Blind SQL injections are very similar to classic SQL injections that we covered previously. So they basically allow an attacker to exploit the web application and run SQL queries, and then the SQL queries will actually be executed by the database engine. So for example, if you run a select statement to select the password from the user's database, the web application will send it to the engine, to the database engine, and the database engine will execute it. The only problem is with blind SQL injections is that you will not see the result being displayed on screen because the result is not returned to the web application. That is the only difference between blind and normal SQL injections. So let me show you a quick example. Previously, we had this example right here, and I already put the payload because we covered it before. We're selecting the username, and you can see on screen the username and the password being returned in here, and we have the admin and its password. So that's an example of a normal SQL injection. In a blind SQL injection, the query that we executed in here will actually be executed on the target. So this query right here would be executed on the target and will be executed by the database engine, but we will not see the result on screen. Therefore, exploiting it is a little bit trickier, and that's what we're going to focus on in this class. As usual, you'd want to go ahead and test everything, click every button. I know I always say this, but it's very important to understand it because in these classes now, it seems like I already know where the vulnerability is, like I have a superpower, but I don't. Obviously, we covered how you approach a pen test or a bug hunt, and now we're just focusing on individual vulnerabilities. So I'm going to turn on my interceptor, and I'm just going to load any page. First of all, you want to take a look at the page the way it is. So just have a normal look at the page. Again, you have a number of parameters in here that you should test. Test everything as we explained before, but I'm going to turn on my interceptor and we're just going to reload this page. And as you can see, we have the query parameter in here. So you have the product ID, which is a parameter that you should test for all of the known vulnerabilities. And if we look under the request cookies in here, we have 2 cookies being sent. So this is the first time that we exploit something through the cookies. We have the name here, tracking ID, and we have the value right here. So similar to what we usually do, we go ahead and test all possible vulnerabilities. And because we're covering SQL injections in here, we're gonna test for SQL injections. And as covered in the previous class, to test for SQL injections, we usually run a false and a true statement. A false statement would look something like this. So we would close the original statement, and then we would say, for example, and 2 is equal to 1, and we close it with a comment. And like I said, there's different types of comments that you should test with. You could look at them in the cheat sheet, or with experience, you will know the different types. And then to run a true statement, you could simply run the exact same statement, but this time, instead of 2 is equal to 1, we're going to say 2 is equal to 2, which is true, which should return a true statement. So let's go ahead and run a false statement. And again, going back, you need to take a good look at the page and what it looks like, and make sure you noticed all the changes or all the things that could change within the page, because we're about to run a false statement. Therefore, the page should break or change in some way. So let's go ahead and run the false statement. I'm just going to paste it after the current value for the tracking ID. So I have my comma in here that closes the existing statement in the backend in the web application, and then I'm injecting and 2 is equal to 1, which is false, and then I'm adding a comment to ignore everything that comes after that. Anything that the web application adds to this query will be ignored as a comment. I'm going through this very quickly because we covered all that in details in the previous lecture. So if this seems a little bit hard to understand, then please revise the previous lecture. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to forward this request. Something did change. In here, I had something saying welcome back, and now it disappeared because I actually ran a false statement. Now let's go ahead and run it again. This time we're going to run the true statement. So this is false. 2 is equal to 1 is false. Now let's run a true statement. 2 is equal to 2. And note how in here we're going to have a string that says welcome back. So I'm going to hit enter, and we're going to forward. And perfect. As you can see, we have the welcome back is back. So basically, if we run a true statement, we see the welcome back. And if we run a false statement, we do not see the welcome back. Therefore, this indicates that whatever we are injecting is being accepted by the web application and is being executed on the database engine. Now, this slight difference, the welcome back, and as I mentioned in the previous lecture, could be different depending on the web application. So sometimes maybe you'll see an image might not load, or something like the pricing in here could be broken, or the stars. You just need to make this very, very abstract. When you run a true statement, you should get something that is very similar to the normal execution of the page. And then when you run a false statement, you should get something else. Something should break, or something should disappear, or something extra should appear. But the main thing is the page should be different based on the statement that you're sending to it.